Thank you for a very kind introduction. Namaskar, hello, and good morning, everyone. To begin with, I'd like to congratulate Rohit and the entire commercial vehicle team for a remarkable 10 years. In commercial vehicle terms, some of our products may have clocked in 1 million kilometers. I have been fortunate and privileged to be a part of this decade of conversations which have shaped what the commercial vehicle industry thinks in India. And thank you all, everyone, for joining us today on a full load. The load seems to get bigger, heavier, and interesting as the years pass by. So the next 10 or 12 minutes, I'm going to share our thoughts on why this is just not another decade. This is a decade where we would like to decide and execute on what we think on powertrains, on how we develop our capabilities and technology ownerships, on how we actually work around on the data, IPs, and this is how we believe that the industry is likely to shape up. With a glance on how the world that we live in looks around today, unfortunately painted in orange and red. These are not the conflicts in isolations, although they happen thousands of miles away. They actually influence the energy dynamics, they disrupt the supply chains, they cause inflations, and slows down many economies. Despite all the stress all around, India is one bright spot amongst the all red and orange. And for us, I believe it's not by default. It's a structural decoupling that India has been able to achieve to have this resilience, strength, and grow continuously over the last 6-10 years, despite of all the distress that's happening all around. And for commercial vehicle industry, it is not about just India's growth story anymore. It is also about how we actually encash on the turning the global uncertainties into our opportunities. And that's what India's growth story looks like. Speaking about growth, we are headed towards multi-year, multi-fold growth, rising from a $4 trillion economy to almost $30 trillion economy. Urbanization is likely to move from 37 to 65%. As per Niti Aayog, almost 70% of the India's infrastructure is yet to be built. And that speaks for everyone in this room on what the freight demand looks like going forward, right? And India will be the number one contributor in terms of workforce. And that is something that's very unique that we will be having. But it's not about how much we produce over this next decade. It is how much of the underlying technology we are going to own that will define on how this industry is likely to move. When we talk about the freight growth is here to stay, India growth is here to stay. But unfortunately, the freight models that we are currently operating on needs to revamp on three aspects. Largely, we need to reduce our import bills, hence the energy mix has to go the transition. We have phenomenal import bills in terms of our components in electronics, software. That's something that we need to work around. Achieving our net zero goals requires a 40% emission reductions from where we are here today. And if we have to achieve the global benchmark of 8% logistics cost, multimodal transition is something that we need to really focus on going forward. So it's really not about just a freight growth. It doesn't mean that we have more inefficient and carbon producing freight. That is what we need to really address going forward. Just to give a glimpse on how the numbers look like, two aspects here. Heavy commercial vehicles account only for a quarter of the entire volumes, but they carry almost 83% of India's freight demand. And if you look at the churn story that we have, it's a very interesting development over the last 6-7 years that we see, is almost 60% of the demand has come from replacement. Supported by these aging fleets, scrappage, green mandate, and efficiency. If I have to zoom down to 10 years down the line, I see the growth is not going to come from expansions. It's largely going to come from uh, replacement cycles year on year. And that's where strategically we need to look at in terms of regulatory push. If you look at how 20 years ago we started as an industry for the first emissions to what we are today, and 10 years down the line or 7 years down the line, we'll be looking at BS7 going forward. You know, if I put the data into perspective, a decade ago, in 2000, we were almost a $250,000 as a vehicle industry. Today, we are $1.2 million industry, and that we have achieved through all these emissions, technological developments, and cost pressures. So for us, this should not be regulatory compliances is not a cost. It's actually a perfect demand indicator, because every new regulation push that has ever been put into the industry has created new fleets, introduced new parts, and increased the aftermarket value pool. If I had to give you a glimpse on how the aftermarket, the alternative fuel mix looks like, for the last 60 years, we've been used to diesel. That share is likely to loosen over the next 10 years, beginning with almost 15% of alternate fuel today to 20-25% by end of this decade, and around about 42% by another 10 years. And large part of it will be defined by electrification. And we may debate on the mix of the fuel, but we cannot deny the kind of quantum and the magnitude of change this alternate fuel is going to bring in. We believe the inflection point for diesel to move to hydrogen and LNG and alternate fuels will be largely towards 2033 for heavy commercial vehicle. Although this adoption varies by the segment that we operate in, each has adopted in a different level of adoption. By 2025, heavy commercial vehicles is the only one which is untouched, and its fate will be defined on how the infrastructure for LNG and hydrogen will develop over the next 5 to 7 years, and coupled with how we developed our dedicated freight corridors. So that's the battlefield remaining yet to be solved within the alternate fuel landscape. I'd like to talk about the less discussed in conferences about the automotive aftermarket. Commercial vehicle aftermarket is $1 billion plus opportunity and growing phenomenally. Unfortunately, we are still in the legacy business. E-commerce is growing significantly on all sectors, but if you see where the commercial vehicle industry is, it's highly fragmented, least digitalized, catalogs have clarity issues, and we are working on demand by default and not by design. What I mean by, we do not have a granular demand on how much one distributor should stock, when it should stock, and what is the vehicle park that's likely to come in. And that's the area that we need to resolve if we have to encash the next 10 years of the aftermarket value that's going to bring in on table. Speaking about the value, I think so we have been phenomenal with creating great products of late, but we need to work significantly as climate change discussions take center stage. Circular economy plays a very important role going forward. So, imagine a scenario where all these electric vehicles arrive at a first end of its life, maybe in next 5 to 7 years. We'll be sitting with a pile of lithium, cobalt, and nickel, and we could extract it only we have designed the vehicles in that way. So, in simple terms, recycling and reuse should not be looked at as a compliance hazard. It's a next level of business opportunity at end of vehicle's life is where the circular economy business begins. And that's something that we really need to work on today as an industry, to design our vehicles, manufacture our vehicles, sell our vehicles, and recycle our vehicles in a way that we can encash this circular economy. If I had to slice and dice the 4 decades into 4 stages, we have achieved fairly well in terms of achieving scale. India is the third largest commercial vehicle manufacturer in India. In terms of competitiveness, most of our tier 1, tier 2 suppliers are global suppliers today in terms of quality and cost. The third, the transition that we are in is a transformation that we see in terms of electrification, digitalization, intelligent freight. But the real fork is not here. The real fork is how we developed our capabilities going forward. So the future of next 10 years is not about how we are actually focusing on volumes. It's about how much technology within the volumes we are going to focus is going to define the technological ownership. And that will define whether India will be viewed as a capability center, will we design and manufacture here, or will remain an assemblers? And that's the question we need to really focus on. Atmanirbhar policy, beyond the politics, is one of the most consequential industrial pivot that India might have seen for quite a few years. And all of this has to happen simultaneously to make this a reality. We have been focusing a lot on vendor management, but we really need to drill down to tier 2, tier 3 capability developments today. We need to move from build to print to actually owning the technology nodes, because that's what going to bring the value pool from, and then export to the world. We as an industry are not data driven, but today's world, we have to focus on data, intelligence and artificial intelligence, the new beast that's come in the boardrooms. And that's something that we need to really simultaneously work on as Atmanirbhar. So if I had to compile the 4 pillars that are going to matter during the next decade, in my mind, this is like I started my presentation, this is just not a decade, but another decade that we really need to focus. Once in a generation opportunity, let us not miss this bus. Let us build it right and build it now. So on this note, whatever I have presented right now is kind of a roadmap, right? And roadmaps are not built by themselves. They're built on data which you can trust, advice which is in your context, and an experience which will help you to execute. That's what we founded Expandus for. It's been 11 years, and with some contributions with our clients. And there are 4 areas that we really operate on, but today I'd like to focus on OE Intel. It's one of the India's largest automotive data lake, and I'll showcase you with some of the examples on how it can help the automotive industry. A case in point, again, I would like to bring on is a 12 billion automotive aftermarket industry, all segments put together, is still working on a broken data point. You know, the manufacturers are working with limited or no visibility. The dealers are, some zones, the dealers are facing stockouts, and somewhere they are looking at, inventory management is a big challenge. Garages are struggling with wrong parts and rework process. E-commerce today accounts for only 2% of the entire automotive aftermarket industry, and that's the growth I'm talking about here. And to make that growth happen, that is the kind of problem we are able to solve as OE Intel. Our product starts from cleaning up your own catalogs, from messy catalogs to make it searchable, standardized, usable for digital readiness. We have the largest fitment catalog in India today, right from two-wheel to commercial vehicle. And it weaves into the district level, 700 plus district level SKU-wise demand estimation. Now, and every time you make a transaction, that becomes a loop to help you cross-sell, upsell, and digitalize the entire transaction better. So in practice, this is how the platform look like. You can slice and dice from year, make, model, engine, put in any part, any aggregate, it will just pop out the compatibility matrix and tell you what are the current active variants, active models, how many that part is compatible to how many variants. It goes beyond, like I said, into distribution planner, and that's the key here. Right from what is the active vehicle park. Registration is not active vehicle park, right? So active vehicle park, district-wise, what is the opportunity for the SKUs that you produce, the segments that you operating, that OEMs that you cater in, by volume, value, and this is refreshed on a regular basis to give you an ongoing intelligence and a demand trend. So in a boardroom, we typically have a question, we will grow by 50 crores. And honestly, nobody has the data to know from where you're going to get that. And we keep running around. But this gives you a complete dashboard on how you can really make it a data-driven decision making. So it's been half a decade for building this platform. 90% plus vehicle park has been covered. And this also allows us one of the most accurate custom intelligence, whether your requirement is 35,000 feet view or granular deep dive. This database becomes the Bible for everything that we want to do in data research and consulting for automotive industry. On this note, I will like to thank you everyone for patiently listening, and I look forward for a wonderful session and panel discussions forward. Thank you.